On Thursday, April 4th, 1968, 6:01 p.m., a shot rang out in Memphis, Tennessee that would change history. The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King's murder was met with furious riots and demands for justice to be brought to his killer. 2 months later, a prison escapee named James Earl Ray was arrested and charged with Dr. King's murder. But Ray would soon escape prison yet again, this time from one of the most notorious prisons in the U.S.
Nobody has ever escaped from back here successfully.
A fortress tucked in the woods of the Appalachian Mountains. It was the Alcatraz of the South.
When this prison was opened, it was an extremely violent prison.
This is Brushy Mountain. Throughout the 20th century, Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary was the last place on earth anybody would want to go. Hidden deep in the remote wilderness of East Tennessee, the compound is encircled by miles of rugged terrain that housed the worst of the worst for decades. Violence and disease ran rampant, and escape was virtually impossible. Once you came into Brushy Mountain, you were likely to never get out. Although Brushy Mountain didn't become a prison until 1896, its history is deeply rooted in the financial fallout of the Civil War. In 1891, during Reconstruction, the state of Tennessee was so poor that it couldn't house the majority of its prisoners. Desperate for new revenue, the government solution was to lease convicted felons to private coal mining firms in the Coal Creek Valley.
That in turn put the Free World coal miners out of work. They all banded together. They loaded all the inmates onto a train, sent them back to Nashville. Nashville then in turn sent the state militia up here. And when the militia came in, it was a battle.
The battle, known as the Coal Creek War, was a 17-month-long armed conflict between the state and the coal miners put out of work. It would leave hundreds arrested, dozens wounded, and 27 dead.
It was real similar to the Hatfield and McCoys type deal. After about a year and a half, the state said that'd be enough. We're not gonna do this.
The violent toll would lead the state of Tennessee to begin mining for coal themselves, using prisoners as miners. Housing for the inmates was constructed, and the Brushy Mountain State Prison was born.
The state of Tennessee bought 4,000 acres. They brought 200 inmates in here and built the original prison. The original prison was an all-wood structure, 4 stories high.
In 1896, Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary officially opened. As prisoners arrived, they were immediately handed a pickaxe and sent down into the coal mines.
From 1896 to 1967, we were a coal mining prison. We mined coal for 71 years. We had several mines on this property. There were 7 mines scattered between the 2 mountains that we're down in the middle of.
But coal mining was dangerous, and so were the inmates. Between the deteriorating facility and increase in violence against the guards, major renovations were needed. When a fire destroyed much of the prison in 1931, the state decided to create a fortress.
When that prison burned, then the state allocated the money, and this prison was built and completed in 1936. They added some additional buildings back here. They extended the yard, the size of the yard, and built the wall rather than having a wood stockade type fence.
Even if an inmate were to scale the 18-foot stone walls and razor wire, they would have to survive the harsh, mountainous terrain surrounding the prison.
Nobody has ever escaped from back here successfully.
The most daring attempt was in 1977 by Brushy Mountain's most infamous inmate, James Earl Ray.
He came here in 1970. He was the confessed killer to Dr. Martin Luther King.
With Martin Luther King Jr.'s killer sentenced, he was heading for one of the most notorious prisons in the country.
We were considered the end of the line. If other institutions couldn't handle a particular inmate for whatever reason, they sent him here to us. And we had somewhere between 550 and 600 inmates that are all hardcore max inmates. And you had to expect some trouble, but the type of inmate we were getting, it was every day. It was every day.
The presence of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassin enraged the prison's black inmates. James Earl Ray knew that if he didn't escape, he was in serious danger.
While James was here, he tried 4 times to escape. He got to the roof of B block. He came down outside the gutter. He had a green blanket on him and was crawling across the yard. One of the officers on the gun tower saw it. She fired the warning shot. Everybody came out to see what was going on with the gunshot, and then they rolled the blanket back and there was James.
In June of 1977, James saw one more chance to flee, and he took it.
There was a fight that started on the lower part of the yard. It got everybody's attention diverted down to the bottom of the yard, while James and his friends made their escape. They made a ladder out of water pipe, and they screwed everything together up on the upper yard. James and 6 other inmates escaped over the wall.
When James and the other convicts fled into the wooded mountains, the entire state of Tennessee was immediately put on high alert.
The FBI and CIA were here, along with state authorities, local authorities, internal affairs. Everybody was here.
Soon, patrol helicopters and tracking dogs were scouring Brushy Mountain for the escaped convicts. A few were found quickly, but it took the dog handlers over 2 days to finally track down James Earl Ray.
He was laying down on the ground in a brush pile, and he was covered up with leaves and sticks and brush. And the dog just came right up to him. Sandy was the bloodhound that found him, and Sandy didn't bark. She ran a silent trail. So James never knew how far ahead of her he was. He didn't have a clue. Now, that's the only escapes that's ever got outside this wall.
After being on the run for 54 hours, James only made it 8 miles from the prison walls.
He was brought back to the institution. He was walked in the front door and went straight to lockup.
4 years later, James Earl Ray's fears were realized when he was attacked and stabbed by 4 inmates.
The reason for the stabbing was in retaliation for the killing of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Ray survived the attack, but would spend the next 15 years at Brushy Mountain, never to escape again. The violent nature of Brushy Mountain inmates, combined with constant overcrowding, made working conditions dangerous for the guards.
There were some safety concerns with the type of inmates that we had and the amount of staff that we had. We were greatly outnumbered. We had like 50 to 1 odds, 50 inmates for every 1 officer.
But in 2009, after 113 years, the facility closed for the same reason it was originally built, to save money. And all of the Brushy Mountain inmates were transferred to another prison just 10 miles down the road.
When they started talking about closing us down, they added on to that prison over there. That prison now is the largest prison in the state. It'll hold 2,500 inmates.
Although Brushy Mountain is no longer an active prison, it remains an important part of the economy of Morgan County, Tennessee. And in 2013, the prison was purchased privately and converted into a tourist attraction.
That opened up serious jobs for this community. We've gone from a poverty-stricken county to where we're actually making money in our county, and that's part of Brushy and also the great people that want our county to thrive.
Walking through the abandoned halls and cells, there is an eerie presence of the prisoner sentence here and the guards who risked their lives trying to keep the peace.
Here at Brushy Mountain, we have tours that are happening every day. I do have former inmates and former guards that are here telling their stories as you go. The former guards have some of the most horrific stories, but they tell you exactly how life was here and how they couldn't turn their back because of the horrible inmates that were here.
As for the treacherous forest surrounding Brushy Mountain that helped thwart James Earl Ray's failed attempt to escape in 1977, it has become home to one of the world's most difficult foot races.
The Barkley Marathon is a 100-mile cross-country foot race, and you have 60 hours to complete it. It's extremely rough, and it's by invitation only. And people come here from all over the world to run the marathon. Now, the Barkley has been run every spring for about the last 30 years. In 30 years, there's been very few people completed in that a lot of the time.
People don't realize this is here. It's such a big, amazing place, and they have no clue until they get here. They're saying, oh, wow, this is all going on here at Brushy Mountain.
As far as museums go, you'd be hard-pressed to find one whose history is as full of danger as the walls of Brushy Mountain. And as the legacy of the prison endures, so does the question every person asks themselves when they visit the Alcatraz of the South. Could I have escaped?